My name is Josh Levin, and I'm the president of LympheDIVAs. Want to thank you for stopping by our virtual exhibition booth here at the Lymphatic Education and Research Network. For those of you who are not familiar with LympheDIVAs, we are a little bit of a different type of company. We have only been around now for about 10 years, or almost 10 years, and we do things very differently, starting from how we got started. Unlike a lot of the other companies that are out there, we were started by two women who were breast cancer survivors, a woman named Robin Miller and another woman named Rachel Levin Troxel, who was my sister. Both of them were diagnosed with breast cancer when they were very young, and once they had completed their breast cancer diagnosis and treatment, both of them noticed the beginnings of lymphedema. And this was back in 2006, and at that point, there were no options other than medical beige. And between the way the garment looked and between the way the garment felt, where it was hot and heavy and coarse and ugly, neither of these wonderful, beautiful women wanted to wear their compression sleeves. And my sister Rachel talked with her physical therapist, who told her that if she didn't like the garment and there weren't really any other options out there, then she should make something that she would want to wear. And that's what she went ahead and did. Rachel was a triathlete and had worn sports compression for years. And she didn't really understand why medical graduated compression couldn't feel like sports compression. And that's really what she set out to do, was to create a medical grade graduated compression garment that felt like a sports compression, so that it was breathable and moisture wicking and comfortable and lightweight and would have a nice feel to it. And that's what LympheDIVAs became. When she first launched, she also didn't want to do any skin tones. That was one of the things that she really didn't like, that she didn't want it to look like it blended, because it didn't blend in. Whether it was the medical beige or any other skin tone, it didn't match her skin tone, and it probably doesn't match yours either. And so she really wanted to make this about fashion and make this something that it would be fun to wear and not just something that she had to wear. So she was the first person, and LympheDIVAs became the first company to offer something besides medical beige. And she came out with blues and reds and purples and all these gorgeous colors, and even just a solid black that could go with everything. And shortly after she started the company, she started getting calls asking to have a beige option for those that wanted it. And so we introduced those as well. And it wasn't until about a year later that we started playing around with adding patterns and really making this a fashion accessory and not just another stocking type of color. And once we started putting those patterns out, we noticed that that's really what people and patients wanted to wear. They didn't want it to just be plain, which still stood out. They wanted it to really be fashionable. And we started off with just a few patterns, and now we've got over 100 different patterns. We can put crystals on them. It's really about making this fun and giving the people who have to wear it some control over their condition, and make it something not necessarily enjoyable, because they're still compression garments at the end of the day, but at least make it a little bit better when you have to put it on in the morning, and really improve the interactions that you might have with other people throughout the day. One of the things that Rachel really didn't like was when she was wearing that beige one, people would come up to her and say, "Oh my God, what happened to your arm?" And instead, once she started wearing the LympheDIVAs and the patterns, the approach became, "Oh my God, that's so cool, where'd you get it?" And it was just a much more positive experience. And that's what we try to do at LympheDIVAs, is really just improve the experience of having to wear these, both in terms of the physical as well as the emotional. And that is also what makes us different when we talk about the physical improvement. When we look at how compression garments work, which is something that both my sister Rachel as well as my father, Dr. Howard Levin, who took over for her after she passed away from her breast cancer, really dived into. My father was originally a bench-trained NIH researcher, and later went into practicing medicine and then management, but he really built his career on understanding medicine, understanding how the body works. And when my sister started this company, he really took all of his attention to learn about this and learn as much about it as he could. One of the things that he really learned was that there was a lot that wasn't known. There are a large amount of studies out there. A lot of them really don't tell you all that much because they either have a small sample size or were relatively short term. They provide some information, but it wasn't like the medicine that he was used to dealing with, where there were these massive long-term studies that could really tell a medical practitioner how to do something or how to react given a certain patient. And lymphedema doesn't really have that ability. And so there was a lot of unknowns, but he still tried to learn as much about it as he could. And so one of the things that he tried to figure out was, what are these compression garments doing? How are they working? And really, they kind of work in a twofold piece. One is that you're now wearing compression on your limb. So overall, you're getting more pressure inside that limb. The way that the lymphatic vessels work is that they take in fluid and then move them back out. So by increasing the overall pressure around them, it makes it a little bit easier for them to work, which helps them. The other piece of this is that they are graduated. So the further along your limb, so if we're looking at the arm, you've got a much higher degree of compression over by your fingers to your palm, and it should get less as you go all the way up your arm. So it goes from a very high to lower to lower to lower to lower, and things like to move from a high pressure environment to a low pressure environment. And that's what helps get the fluid out of that limb and back into the working circulation of the lymphatic system. At least that's the theory. As I said, the science behind it is wonderful, but there is now decades of people wearing these and getting positive results. But the problem has always been people wearing them. It doesn't matter how good the garment is, if it's sitting in your drawer because it's ugly and it's uncomfortable, it's doing you absolutely no good. And we at LympheDIVAs have tried to make it more likely that you'll wear it and then get the good effects from having worn it. So now that we sort of have an idea of how these garments are working, it's really important to make sure that the levels of compression that you're getting on your arm are the levels that your therapist or your physician wants you to get. And so when we first came out as a company, we did what all the other companies were doing, which was having just a size range fitting chart. So you would take measurements around your wrist, around the thick part of your forearm, and around your bicep, and then you would look on these charts to see what size you should fit into. Now, the problem with this is it doesn't really tell you anything other than, oh, I'm a medium. But medium is overall a pretty meaningless statement. What you really want to know is how much compression you're getting at each of those points along your arm. So when a manufacturer says a garment is 20 to 30 millimeters of mercury, all that really means is that the compression is starting at the wrist somewhere between 20 millimeters of mercury and 30 millimeters of mercury, depending on the size of your wrist, the way the garment is knit, and the size of the garment. So when you look at those measurement charts, really only the wrist measurement is telling you something. So if you're fitting into a medium and the medium says it fits a wrist that's 19 centimeters to 24 centimeters of circumference, you're going to get about 20 millimeters of mercury at the lower end, that 19 centimeter range, and you should get about 30 millimeters of mercury at the upper range, that 24. But you don't really know exactly where you're starting, and more importantly, you don't know what happens after that. So if you're someone who has a very narrow wrist and a very large forearm, it is very likely that you might be in a situation where you're ending up with more compression in your forearm than you are at your wrist. And because it's increasing compression as you go up the arm, that could prevent the fluid from moving all the way up to where your working lymphatics can pick it up and process it. And that's something that we really don't want. And so about 5 years ago, my father came up with something that we called our fitter's aid. Basically, we were getting calls several times a week from people saying, I fit across different sizes. I'm a small at the wrist, but then a medium in the forearm, and then I'm back down to a small again at the upper arm. What size should I wear? And given our concern of always wanting to make sure that we're fitting people appropriately and always making sure that the garments that we get in are acting the way that we think that they are, we have testing equipment inside our office. And so we would take these plastic tubes, put our garment over them, and match the tube circumference to what the patient's arm size was at either their wrist, their forearm, and their upper arm. And we would measure the compression in all of our garments to find out what might be the best option for that person. So what we ended up doing was having to do these measurements for every single person and individual that came across. And instead of making one-offs of all of this, we decided to fully map out the circumference to compression curve so that we could understand of any patient's given circumferences at those points, we would understand what sizes would give what levels of compression. And this really opened up a lot of different options for people. Not only did it tell us how much compression you were getting at each point, but it would also let us give you different options so that, in a lot of cases, there are multiple choices that you may have that fit within, let's say your therapist wants you in a 20 to 30 millimeter of mercury garment. There could be multiple garments that fit within that, but at varying levels of compression. And so if you're someone that puts on their garment for the first time and you say, this is just too tight, I'm not going to wear it. Moving up a size may not always be your best choice, as you don't know how that's going to change the delivery of compression along the arm. And so with our fitter's aid, you may have other options and you can see what those options are and be able to pick the option that is best for you, that works for you. And by doing this, it really gives you a lot more control over it. It lets you dial in what level of compression is comfortable and is managing your edema, and gives you a lot more options so that you and your therapist can work to find something that fits you and works for you and that both of you understand exactly how it's working. Now, one of the other most important things about this is something that I touched on earlier, which was that if you're not wearing it, it's not doing any good. And while I love our company and I love our garments, and I hope you do as well, if you don't find them comfortable or they're not working for your particular arm, then it's not the right garment for you. And that's the wonderful thing that my sister did, was she created an environment where there were a lot more options. Before LympheDIVAs came around, it was only beige. About a year later, some other companies started offering other solid colors, or at least another skin tone color for those that weren't Caucasian. And now there are a lot of different options out there. And the one that's right for you is the one that you like to wear, the one that you want to wear, and the one that works. Whether it's ours or anybody else's, it's going to be up to you to figure out which one that is. I would hope that you like ours. I do. And so do a lot of other men and women out there. But ultimately, this choice is up to you. And when you're in control, we think that that gives you a lot more power and ability to manage your condition. So I'd like to thank you for stopping by, and you can always visit our website at lymphedivas.com and call us at 866-411-3482, and we are happy to answer any questions or help you fit. Have a wonderful day.